Okay, so we continue with yesterday's pasuk. Yasser bin, this is 1918. Yasser bincha ki yesh tikva ve'el hamisol al tisal nafshecha. Discipline your son, for there is hope. Oh, you came just in time.
Sorry.
That's okay. We just had a discussion about other Mishlei stuff, and so we like literally just started.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Yasser bincha ki yesh tikva. Discipline your son because there's hope. Ve'el hamisol al tisal nafshecha. And to his killing or to his outcry, don't lift your soul. Okay, so our questions were, what is lifting your soul? 2, what is Mussar in this context? If it's rebuke, what then in what form? If it's discipline, how broad is that? 3, what's the relationship between discipline and hope? Hope for what? 4, what is hamiso? What destruction or outcry is this? 5, what's the havamina corresponding to ki yesh tikva? I mean, what's this guy thinking such that you need to tell him, hey, there's hope? 6, what is the havamina corresponding to ve'el hamiso al tisa nafshecha? And then 7, what if there really is no hope? Meaning, what are the parameters of the pasuk? So because we started late, I'm going to take a different track than we usually do. Usually we do one of the mafarshim and then like dive into it and then do another one. I want to do just several mafarshim just to give you a broad spectrum, and then we'll see what appeals most to us. So if you look, let's start off with Rabbeinu Yonah is the closest to what the line of thinking that we did. So let's do that because that'll allow us to review the direction we were taking. So Rabbeinu Yonah's left column, 3 down. Yasser bincha ki yesh tikva ve'el hamisol al tisal nafshecha. Al tomar, do not say noash, hopeless. V'rosacha ki hu kasha lev l'kabel Mussar ki ein tikva. When you see that your son is stubborn to accept Mussar because there's no hope, or that there's no hope. And you don't say it's hopeless that there's no hope. Aval yesh tikva, but there is hope. Ki teshacharenu Mussar tamid. So teshacharen I think is really teshachar, but it means if you are like consistent or like constant in Mussar with him. And you may hope for a benefit and trust that he will attain it. Okay, so that's like what we said, is that the thought is, the rationalization number 1 is I'm not going to rebuke him because there's no hope. And it's saying, no, if you keep at it and if you're consistent with it, then there will be hope. And he doesn't explain how. And that's kind of what we were discussing mostly yesterday. And then the el hamiso al tisa nafshecha. So Rabbinu Yonah learns hamiso as his outcry. And he says, al yera levavachav al tachmo lekol bechio limshof shivtacha lemanzos. Do not let it be bad in your eyes, and don't have compassion on the voice of his cry, such that you would withdraw your rod, meaning your disciplinary rod, leman zos, on account of this. So don't let his protesting like dissuade you. Okay, so that reading-wise, that's the approach we took yesterday, and we can go into it more. But let's contrast that with extreme other approach. Rashi, ve'el hamiso al tisa nafshecha, al takehu makas maves. Don't hit him so hard you kill him. Yeah. So he's reading the pasuk as ve'el hamiso al tisa nafshecha. Don't lift your soul to killing him, meaning don't go overboard. Yeah.
Isaac said something.
Yeah. That was how they find good.
Oh, okay. So you got company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the other boundary.
Yes. So according to this, right, it's the two extremes. You have the parent who never disciplines their kid because they because they think there's no hope, and then you got the parent who is overboard in disciplining them to the point where they actually
where they're like, you're dead to me.
Yeah, right. So no. So I mean, I think Rashi is speaking literally.
Yeah, no, I'm saying.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah. Because first of all, corporal punishment was a big thing back then, and it was, again, we don't know. One question we didn't ask, well, I guess we did ask in the parameters, is what age are we talking about here? But like, it is definitely a thing that they had to warn people to not go overboard in using corporal punishment, because you could this is unfortunately a thing even nowadays, but even more so back then, of like, if you're using corporal punishment, you can go overboard and like severely wound or damage the kid. I mean, that's one theory. It's one theory about how Beethoven got deaf. I think the current theory is that it was his syphilis from his many romantic affairs, but his
wasn't deaf from his youth.
No, he became deaf right before writing the Sixth Symphony. So this is like in his adulthood.
So the idea that he became a great composer while deaf is not.
No, it is. He
became a great composer before he was deaf.
He was a good composer before he was deaf. He became a great composer after he was deaf, in my opinion.
But good on like Beethoven standards,
right?
Still.
Yeah. So the thing is that I gotta defend my boy, Beethoven. But basically, his father wanted him to be another Mozart. Now Mozart was like this child prodigy and was like writing symphonies when he was like 3 and like operas when he was 5 or whatever. And I think his father beat him a lot, and that was one theory that like he beat him in the head, and like you could cause severe harm.
Symbols, like
No, that's only on Looney Tunes. Yeah. So I think it is literal, but I don't think it's literal in the sense that like it's only warning you about killing him. I mean, it could be going overboard, harming him. It could be psychological harm. A lot of. I think we can safely like put that in there. So it's the two extremes. So that's Rashi. Another one I saw is let's see here. Hold on.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Rashi? So what do you think Rashi would say if even if let's say the person is a very sensitive person or the situation is very sensitive or a combination,
Yeah.
and even the slightest bit of Mussar might kill him or
Yeah.
harm him.
Yeah.
So what would you do?
Right. So this kind of connects to what we discussed right before this, is that like, you really have to be sensitive to the psyche of your kid. That's actually a story that I can't vouch for the veracity of the story because I'm not the age of Rav Soloveitchik, but so we know about the Rav, right? And we know about his younger brother, Rav Aaron Soloveitchik. People don't talk about his older brother.
What?
Do you know he has an older brother?
No.
So
Also.
yeah, I believe so. Yeah. So his older brother, I believe, became a chemistry professor in YU and specialized in Talmud Yerushalmi. Okay. So I heard a story, again, I can't vouch for this, but put that in all the stories about like all Gedolim, that someone asked him about that once, and he said that his father was very strict with all of them, and this is a classic story, which is that not only like was there an expectation that you give the right svara or whatever, but if you said it in one too many words or one too few words, you get a patch, right? Now I don't know how literal that is, and the Rav's older brother said I couldn't take the patches, and he asked advice from someone, like I guess because because of that pressure, there was a threat that he wouldn't form, like he thought he wouldn't be cut out for like learning or whatever. And the advice he was getting, and it was already clear that his younger brother, the Rav, was like a genius, So he was given the advice to become a master in something that his brother is not a master in. And that's why he went to Yerushalmi, and that's why he went to chemistry. Because it was Chachma and it was Torah, and he could like develop his own relationship with that, like outside of his brother's scope and outside of his father's like thing. Again, I don't know if it's true, but even if it's not true, it is a good story about like parenting and discipline. And that's the thing, is like I don't think this is a criticism of Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, in the sense that like it clearly worked on the Rav, and this was his first child, and like sometimes you get it wrong, especially with your first child, and you don't know like the sensitivity, and you're also, it's a different world, like you're between the generations, it's standards can change and what's acceptable and what's not. What works for one generation can't work for the other. So I'm not trying to like diss Rav Moshe's parenting, but yeah. So in terms of your question, yeah, you'd have to however you apply this pasuk, you'd have to apply it to the unique situation of that son and who you are, what the relationship is. Yeah. Weird shot, which I'm bringing just your attention just for the weirdness, not because I want to go into this. So look at the top right, the fake Ibn Ezra. Yesh tikva, because there is a hope. So there's hope that he can prolong his days when you rebuke him. Okay, so that's interesting. Number one, because it's not hope that he will be corrected. It's hope that he will live longer, right? I mean, unless you take Arichus Yamim to be like quality of life, but it is interesting. He doesn't take the simple shot. There's hope of him being corrected. There's hope of him living longer. It's an interesting way to frame it. Maybe it's because it is. My first thought was it is contrasting with the second half of the pasuk of like him dying, but then look what he does with the second half. The El Hamiso, and to his killing, sheyamis acherim, to the fact that your son killed other people. Okay. That's not good. Al tisa nafshecha, don't lift your soul. Lefarnes osa migze lasso, to sustain yourself by his robbery. And then he quotes pasuk where he's getting it from, the elav hu nose es nafshecha. That's from Devarim, and there it means he's parnes mimena, to be sustained by it. So according to the Fake in Ezra, we are talking to a case where the father is being urged to rebuke his son and stop him from engaging in a lifestyle where he's killing others, and the father is like profiting off of the son's like thievery, which I don't know where he's getting that from, but it's like a really radical like reading, so.
And very particular.
Very particular, yeah, very, very particular.
Please don't send this recording to the
Yeah. Oh, so the bank robbery you were talking about yesterday was not not some fictional character? Yeah. Okay, and then I want to read one more, and then we'll pick which one to work on here. I'm trying to remember who it was. Oh, the Rid, if you look below Rashi, the Rid is similar to Rashi. He says, Mussar im tiasrehu. So there's hope that he will accept your Mussar if you rebuke him. So that part's like the Rabbeinu Yonah. Don't say that if you rebuke him, it'll kill him. Again, I don't think he means literally killing him, and therefore you refrain from rebuking him. Or you can say, when you do rebuke him, al tiyasarehu b'makos gedolos shetamiso. So don't use like heavy hits that will kill him. So I think maybe what we should do is like take like just in that Rid, that's really the crossroads here. Meaning, do we say that the second half is saying don't refrain from rebuking him because you feel like you're killing him? Or does it mean don't go overboard in how harsh you are because you might kill him? Let's think about those two and see if we can.
Between the Rid and Rashi.
Yeah. I mean, the Rid really does say both of them in the second half, but like I'm viewing it as like between Rashi and like Rabbinu Yonah, basically. Rashi says don't go overboard because you might kill him, and Rabbinu Yonah says don't like be swayed by his protest. And I think you're right. There is a difference between the Rid and the Rabbinu Yonah. Is that Rabbinu Yonah is saying bechiaso, is saying hamiso is from bechia. I didn't read the last part. Look at Rabbinu Yonah. Hamiso, b'shako shavito, bechiso, b'shako hama. So he's learning that the short. So Smach looks whether it's hey mem hey, which means to cry, or mem vav taf, which is to kill. But the two pshatim I think are not so different. Meaning, Rashi is saying don't go overboard because you might kill him, and Rabbinu is saying don't refrain from rebuking him because you think you might kill him.
Is Rabbinu Yonah saying that? Don't refrain because you think you might kill
him?
Oh,
right, because of his outcry. Right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Like, don't be dissuaded.
Don't be dissuaded by the fact that yeah. And then what we were saying yesterday is like psychologically, the parent thinks when the kid cries, like to the parent, that's like, oh, I'm killing him. He's polishing. Right. Yeah.
So it's crazy.
Yeah. I gotta tell you another. Speaking of crazy story, I gotta tell you another crazy story for Rashi's pshat. We were talking about. Okay, so the first, obviously we all grew up in a generation where like it was not typical to engage in corporal punishment to your kids, or it was frowned upon, starting to be frowned upon. So when I was in graduate school, then there were two programs. There was my program, which was for a master's degree, and then there was also a PhD program, and some of the courses overlapped. So obviously in the PhD program, there were a lot more people who were like older. So there's this guy from this is in YU, this is in Israeli, this frum Jew who, they're all frum Jews, but he looks the part, and the topic of corporal punishment came up, and we were talking about how like it's, how it's like, obviously like we're past that. We weren't discussing it as a topic, it was just like brought up in passing. And he mentioned, so such an awkward story, and the awkwardness is that he didn't think it was awkward. He said that when he was in, I believe like 6th grade or something like that, he said that like, the Rebbe would like to punish the kids, would pull down their pants and spank them in class. And that was the first time I realized, and I knew this intellectually, and he didn't think it was weird. That was the first time I realized that the reason why, and again, this is an obvious point, but that the reason why like corporal punishment is dangerous is because you can so easily get into a situation as the corporal punisher that you just are indulging in your own like base instinctual things, whether it's aggression, whether it's like working out your own psychological issues, and just like you're not responding to the situation at hand that's just like an outlet for your own stuff. And that's like I feel like that's the type of thing that Rashi's talking about going overboard. Like, you know, we're not talking about a parent who thinks that who thinks consciously, my kid will only learn if I hit him really hard. That might be consciously what he's thinking, but like it's the thing that makes him go overboard is something else that I feel like is internal, you know? Like it's not like a reasoned out thing that, you know, like in other words, it's not like for example, let's say like I'm not saying that this is good, but let's say like a kid is about to run out into a little kid is about to run out into the street, and parent grabs the kid and like hits the kid's hand or something like that. You know, that I think is coming from the fact that like I just have to create a painful stimulus so that the kid knows I shouldn't do this. But when you're talking about like you know, yaster bincha, like really like you know, disciplining your kid, and you get involved in hitting. It's just like it opens up the floodgates of your own personal issues that you're just working or taking out on your kid, you know.
Or at least eventually it will do that.
Eventually do that, yeah. It could be it just needs the right level of anger or needs the right like repetition of violations. But yeah, and that's why like I think it's good that this is not done in schools. And you can argue that the reason why it was more acceptable in the time of Chazal, and I don't know if this is just me fantasizing about how good things were back in the day, is that Chazal presumably were more aware of their own emotions and would not engage in something like this that would cross the line in like slipping into their own issues. But who knows if that's true? You know, like they still warn the you know Chachamim on in what do you call it in the 3 weeks, don't hit your Talmidim because you might kill them. You know. Or like, you know, whatever. So like, I guess, you know, there's still a chance of people going overboard then also.
Sorry, I'm still stuck on that story.
I know it's a bizarre story, and like we had to like awkwardly respond, like that's, you know, that was not normal. And again, this guy was older; he was probably in his like 40s or 50s, but still, it was
yeah, like that's. It's also
like that'll get you arrested,
you know,
and could get you
Yeah,
arrested.
for sure.
Yeah,
Take kids' pants off.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because even if you hit a kid, like
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Forget about it. Yeah. No, but I think that still goes on in like in the more the more unregulated. It does 100%. Yeah.
like
A little bit.
the like public embarrassment of like having people down, like especially like as they're like about to be like entering. It's like incredibly traumatic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's what it does to your relationship with learning. I mean,
Yeah.
not just, I mean, what you're saying is bad enough on its own, like the damage per se, but like that's not going to produce a healthy relationship to learning, you know. And that's another reason, I guess, just to add that to this. The concern is that you're going to kill him. That's according to Rashi, right? But the other concern is that you are completely jeopardizing your chances of the Mussar actually working.
Right,
You know,
killing the kids like drive to.
Yeah, you're creating so many more issues. You're not, you know, you're like all the stuff we were saying yesterday about like the conveying of the fact that you care about the fact that there's potential in this kid and like, you know, you believe in it. I don't think that's really coming across in the hitting, except maybe in the most like base distorted way, you know? Yeah.
Every time a kid thinks about learning now, he's just gonna think about getting hit.
Yeah, right.
At Rabbin elementary school.
Yeah.
And he told us a lot of crazy stories that probably weren't true. But he told a story, like this one's feasible. That when he was a kid in school, like if a kid would misbehave during class or whatever, the Rebbe would walk over to the kid, make the kid stand up, and the teacher would take his keys out of his pocket and basically just toss the keys in the air. And you have to keep your eyes on the keys. And while you were looking at the keys, you just knock you in the
Wow. Yeah. See, that's an
Also,
example.
like,
Yeah, right. I mean, I believe it. I do believe that. Yeah.
Possible.
Yeah. Yeesh. Yeah. So don't do that. That's what Rashi said. Now, here's the question. Okay. The question is, that's very clear for the second half. I think like we have a grasp on that. The question is, does that change our reading of the first half? Because Rashi doesn't explain the first half.
Right.
And if you take it the way we took it with Rabbeinu Yonah, right. So just to set up the contrast again, the way we took it with Rabbeinu Yonah is that the pasuk is giving it's refuting two Havamina rationalizations for not rebuking your kid. According to Rashi, it's giving you two extremes. The second half is someone who goes overboard, and the first half is someone who goes underboard. Mm-hmm. That's not a phrase, but so is the first half exactly the same, and the Chiddush is just coming from the fact that this pasuk is giving the extremes, or do we learn the first half differently now that we're learning the second half in this extreme way? Yeah.
I think if you were to talk to the person who's doing the extreme thing in the second half, let's say this is what's necessary to to produce a result.
Yeah.
So if a person's thinking that they're not going to do that, then they'll say there's no hope of getting them to change.
Uh-huh. Okay, right. So so there it still does touch on the conscious form, the conscious rationalization, which is there is no hope versus this is the only hope, right? Like those are the two things. Yeah. It's interesting, by the way, just I should point this out. You know, our typical Mishlei pasuk is Chacham on one side and Fool on the other, or Tzaddik in Russia. But we have encountered pasukim where it's saying the two bad extremes, and that the Chacham is really doing what's in the middle. You know, so this is definitely one of those pasukim according to both readings, really, but more and more according to Rashi.
How would the in the other extreme? How would the first part be read?
I'm not going to discipline my kid at all because there's no hope, and he just completely refrained from
Hands off.
hands off approach, which was like I don't know the story very well, but apparently like that was David's mistake. David Melech, right? He didn't rebuke his son, and that's what led his son to rebel against the Malchus. You know, but yeah, yeah. But yeah, and then again, that could be for many motives, but here the motive is that there's no hope, you know.
Wait, and as you were saying that the idea is that they think the only option is to go overboard. So if you're telling me not to go overboard, then there's no hope.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I was learning it differently then.
Oh.
I was learning the second half the same, is that they think that the only option is to go overboard, but I wasn't saying that the first half is the same person. Meaning what you're, I mean, I'm not saying that's bad reading, but
Right.
that's saying that the person is, it's the same person who's prone to going overboard, but it's like an all or nothing type personality. I was saying it's two different parents. Two different foolish parents. Is the parent who is prone to going overboard and parent who is just reluctant to discipline, and then they just say they rationalize because saying there's no hope. I'm not saying that first half parent is prone to doing the second one, you know.
Yeah, I'm saying because I'm not disagreeing with that, but I'm saying another possible thing to it is that the person of the second half, they're gonna say like if you ask them like why are they doing this, they'll say this is what's necessary.
Yeah.
Like they're not gonna say yeah I'm being more extreme than I need to be.
Right.
So if you tell them they can't do it, they won't think to they won't be able to.
Yeah.
Anything. I mean, I think both are good.
Right. Well, the interesting thing also, by the way, is I don't agree with the advice that Rashi's giving, because no, scratch that. No, I don't agree with the advice. Rashi's learning pasuk, don't hit him so hard that you kill him. If we're right and we're talking about a person who's prone to going overboard, I would say the advice is do not hit him at all. You know, like I think you have to be, if you're prone to doing that, then you should just not engage in that in that type of extreme behavior at all. You know, and in other areas, I think it's where the stakes are lower, then you can strive for a quantitative adjustment. But where the stakes are so high that there's a legitimate concern that you're going to kill him, I think that you just have to not do it. You know,
I guess Rashi had some sort of
Anger.
some sort of what do you call it? Sort of discipline that he used, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds. I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say that like, you know, either it wasn't realistic to say don't engage in corporal punishment
back then,
or the types of again, this is a less of possibility. The types of people were such that they could really like dial it back. You know, like for example, you know, you could let's say like, okay, this is a horrible example. Okay, horrible example. Now the advice, which I agree with, is do not drink and drive. Okay, but if you've ever watched like Mad Men, you know, in the 60s, then it was like, I'm drinking and like, do I get to the point where I shouldn't drive, or did I get to the point where I should drive? You know, back then, in other words, like I don't know if it was because the dangers weren't recognized or whatever, or it was just the social acceptability of drinking. Like they did engage in a quantitative thing. Whereas now we realize that like, no, you have to just not drink and drive. Like that's the safest, you know, thing. So it could be like a similar thing here. Yeah.
When is Mad Men set?
In the 60s.
60s.
Yeah.
Couldn't it be that that's like the like I don't know. Yeah, like I guess if you could like hit your child without going overboard,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be that like wouldn't that?
Yes, then that would be the ideal. Yeah,
Right, so
yeah. Assuming that hitting does work. Yeah.
Right, so then I guess like totally getting rid of hitting would be just like a method of like the Rama was like,
Exactly. It'd be a remedial safeguard against the extreme. It wouldn't be the Chacham's idea.
right. So maybe,
Yeah.
maybe the pasuk is just saying.
Okay, that's a good point.
ideal.
Yeah, meaning okay, good, right. So the pasuk is showing you the two extremes, and Rashi's expressing what the ideal would be, but that doesn't mean that the guy who's plagued with the problem
Right. That's yeah.
would get there by aiming for it. Meaning he might have to get there by going to the opposite extreme and then coming back. Yeah.
Also, just another possibility within Rashi is like maybe they would, hit with their hands, hit with like sticks, something like that.
Yeah.
So it could be that if you hit a kid with a stick, you might kill him, but with your hands, you're not actually going to kill him.
Yeah.
So it's that, and
That's also true, right?
And like adjusting like the force of your hand
Yeah.
is like much harder than okay, I just won't use a stick.
Right. Yeah, that's true. There are behavioral modification ways to mitigate the risk that don't involve internal modification as much. Yeah, Isaac.
I mean, I think this is kind of what you were just saying, but like, it doesn't have to seem to be like Rashi saying, don't use corporal punishment. It just doesn't sound like what.
Yeah, that was my point.
Yeah. Okay.
He's saying don't hit him so hard that you will kill him, meaning you do still hit him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was what that's what I didn't agree with. That's what I said I didn't agree with Rashi. But now I think the way you said that is makes sense. As an aside, just in terms of like the application of the pasuk, not the pshat of the pasuk, is I do think, given that what we were saying also about like how there's physical damage and then psychological damage, this is definitely something that I think a parent needs to keep in mind, or like anyone in an authority position needs to keep in mind with psychological damage as well. Meaning if you like lose, like one thing that's very hard as a teacher is it is hard sometimes to not lose your temper, and you can cause real damage by going overboard in like what you say or how you say it, and that could be as permanently damaging as like as a physical hit, or even worse, because it's psychological, so like it gets in really more. So that's another thing to be careful about, not to go overboard in killing. Yeah. So can we summarize what we have? So it sounds like Rashi is where we're kind of been talking about so far. So
I happen to like Rabeinu Yonah more.
Okay, yeah. I also like Rabeinu Yonah more. Also, yeah. I think Raji's opened up a lot more interesting topics, but I like Rabeinu Yonah's shot more. So Raji is saying that the pasuk is talking about the two extremes. Both foolish parents think that how do we say it? That this is the only. I lost it.
Yeah.
Second half parent thinks the only way that there is hope is if I do this, and then
The first is
Completely hands off.
there's no hope, therefore I won't do it.
Right.
Right.
It could be the same person, and it could be.
It could be the same person, it could be two different people, right? I mean, if it's the same person, then the person has an all or nothing type approach.
Right.
And if it's two different people, then it's just the two ends of the psychological extreme, right? And the pasuk is not saying, but it's implying that there is a middle ground of realizing that there is hope through disciplining without going overboard. But the pasuk is not, the agenda of this pasuk is not to say how to get to that middle ground. This pasuk is only talking about the extremes and warning from the extremes, So that's Rashi. Rabbeinu Yonah is saying two rationalizations why you wouldn't rebuke is number one, you think that there's no hope. And then we said, really, there is hope based on everything we said yesterday, that like maybe the hope is not now, but maybe if you do it constantly, like Rabbeinu Yonah said, or maybe just like, maybe it's your own rationalizations that I've given up on this, but development takes time. There's a lot of reasons why you should keep at it. Also to preserve the relationship, to preserve the underlying message that I care about you, to remind the kid of what the correct value system is, not let him go off into his own world. And then the second half is saying, do not let yourself be moved by his protest or by his crying. And that's the parent who can't tolerate hearing their kid have immediate suffering. And there we're saying that, yeah, fine. If you don't rebuke your kid though, he's going to end up going and robbing banks, and then that's going to cause you real pain, And so like, you're going to have to, it's like the parents who, I know there's a term for this, but like there's a certain stage with like babies where like, you have to let them cry themselves to sleep, otherwise like, what was it?
Helicopter parents?
No.
No, the opposite. Yeah, meaning that the parent has to like let their kid cry and cry and cry and cry, and then eventually they go to sleep, because otherwise they won't learn how to self-soothe. The baby won't learn how to self-soothe,
right.
and then they will
Do that every night.
exactly do that every night. You know, so it's like those parents who, you know, go through that pain of like hearing their kid cry, but they know that it's the best for them if
In the
they
long
like
run.
was that
In the long run.
in the long run, right? So same thing here. Yeah, it feels bad when like you're protesting and like you're you know, or when your kid's protesting and like, you know, and they don't want to rebuke and you're clearly causing them pain, but like in the long run, then this is the best for you and for them. And again, 'cause this is the Mishlei move, is that you don't like seeing your kid suffer, but if you refrain from rebuking because you think he's going to suffer, you are going to get what you don't want, but even more so. You know, it's good, that consequence you're trying to avoid of seeing your kid suffer is going to be blown out of proportion if they never get them, you know, if they never learn how to get back on track. And similarly, also of like Yasser bin Chakish Tikva, that parent does want their kid to be, you know, to live in the right way, and they tell themselves there's no hope. Well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you refrain from rebuking, from disciplining your kid because you think there's no hope, that makes it so there's no hope, and then all the reasons that you were in conflict about before are going to just come to fruition also.
Also the second half. I don't know if you just said that.
Yeah.
The second half, yeah.
Yeah. I was saying that. Yeah, I said the second half, and I'm saying that applies to the first half also.
Yeah.
Okay. And I did not do the Meiri because the Meiri links this pasuk and tomorrow's and the next days.
Class mirror.
Class Meiri, yeah. And then I'm just seeing if in the last 3 minutes if there's anything else that we didn't do. I was looking at the Renach Mias, who quotes Ibn Ezra, and he's the fake one.
Wait, this is a question about Rashi.
Yeah.
So we're well, we're saying we're saying about this. You're not limiting it to literally death, right?
Well, I think Rashi is saying that the pasuk is saying literal death, but then in our application of the pasuk, I'm saying that it could extend to psychological damage or harm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't there, didn't he say once that like Mussar could also like not just as in further application, but like could actually refer to like to things other than death?
Yes. Yeah.
Like to destruction.
Yeah. I just don't think. Just given how.
I think in context, it's not.
Yeah, how literal Rashi's talking about it. Like, don't hit him to the point where you kill him.
Right.
Then
I would easily see that being like over hitting. Like,
yeah, right. But I'm saying like, yeah, I'm saying I would not plug in the broad meaning of death of like a life of bad consequences. Don't hit him to the point.
yeah, not that. I mean like I don't know, like that consequence or this, not
Yeah.
like life that consequence. But like
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like-
Yeah.
like let's say I don't know, like it, like let's say physically damaging or something.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, practically speaking, I don't think it's going to matter because I think the idea is going to come out the same way. But yeah, it's just a question of like, what's the interpretation and what's our application beyond the parameters of the pasuk.
Is
Yeah.
there a fair enough in that?
There enough mean in that question. I think there could be, but most of the time you just end up saying ideas are ideas. It's kind of like the thing of like, how do we know that we're actually interpreting what the Rishonim are saying correctly? Like maybe we're just projecting our own ideas, and then that's where Rabbi Moskowitz says like, if the idea is true, then it doesn't really matter if Rashi said it anyway, you know? So like in that sense, there's no nafkamina, but like, let's say I'm going to have a really contrived case of nafkaminas. Let's say we learn through all psukim on Rashi and corporal punishment and all the halachos and all the gemaras about it, and we're trying to come up with an idea of what's Rashi's approach to corporal punishment. That would be a nafkamina in the sense of what is Rashi saying versus what is just a good idea that Rashi doesn't hold by, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Nafkamina in sugyas. Yeah. All right. Let's stop here for today, and then we can go into the next one tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Go ahead.